Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Last Wednesday, Gautam Adani, one of the richest people in the world, was in good spirits.
That was the day that the Adani Group did a $600 million bond placement, a successful bond issue. That evening, as the Bloomberg story points out, it seemed like a normal evening for him. Gautam Adani played a card game with his wife. He went to sleep.
But around 3 a.m., a colleague delivered some shocking news.
He was woken up in the middle of the night to be told that the U.S. has accused him of being involved in a bribery conspiracy of securities fraud and wire fraud, all of which carry both jail time and significantly high monetary penalties if found guilty. And yes, what probably was a great day for Gautam Adani, in hours turned into a nightmare.
Menaka Doshi is a Bloomberg senior editor based in Mumbai. She says within minutes, senior executives of the Adani Group gathered on conference calls. They spent hours deciding whether they should release a statement and what to say.
There was no immediate reaction from the Adani Group to the news, and it's only much later that they did issue a denial of all the allegations and a promise they would defend themselves vigorously.
In the meantime, the group's stocks and bonds plunged, wiping nearly $30 billion off the conglomerate's market value. The Adani Group's businesses touch many parts of daily life in India. Almost half of the country's shipping containers pass through Adani-owned ports, and tens of millions of people pass through its airports each year. The group also has political influence. Its businesses have often been closely aligned with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's priorities. And Gautam Adani has been a key partner to Modi in his efforts to build the country's domestic infrastructure.
He has, or his businesses have, a leading position in several infrastructure sectors, such as ports, airports, logistics, power, and he's also the second largest cement manufacturer in the country. All of this puts him at the center of India's infrastructure story.
Welcome to the Big Take Asia from Bloomberg News. I'm Wan Ha. Every week, we take you inside some of the world's biggest and most powerful economies and the markets, tycoons, and businesses that drive this ever-shifting region. Today on the show, Adani indicted. What do the U.S. charges mean for the Adani Group? And does the case cast doubt on India's economy and foreign investments? The indictment, all 54 pages of it, details allegations against Gautam Adani and other senior executives at Adani Green Energy. In it, federal prosecutors accuse them of being involved in a complex bribery scheme. We asked Menaka Doshi, a Bloomberg senior editor based in Mumbai, to unpack the case.
The allegations are that Gautam Adani and other co-defendants sought to bribe several state government officials in India to purchase expensive power from the projects that Adani companies and one other renewable energy company were developing in India.
The indictment alleges that the bribery scheme took place in India between 2020 and 2024. And that Adani and other defendants promised to pay more than $250 million in bribes to Indian government officials to win solar energy contracts. Now, Adani Group doesn't trade in the U.S., but it does have American investors. And federal prosecutors alleged that they concealed the plan to bribe officials as they tried to raise money from U.S. investors. And the reason why U.S. prosecutors are allowed to pursue these allegations is because of something called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or the FCPA.
Under the FCPA and other U.S. laws, if any company or entity raises funds in the U.S., but doesn't comply with all the terms and conditions that come with being able to raise funds, especially indulges in corrupt activities, then they can be prosecuted in such fashion.
And one thing Menaka says that stands out about this case is the kind of evidence the U.S. authorities claim they have. And federal prosecutors claim they found a digital trail of the alleged bribery scheme. And according to the feds,
They found PowerPoint presentations and records of the bribes that the Adanis purportedly wanted to pay Indian state government officials for the offtake of power. This in itself is quite surprising, many lawyers have told me, because really, who does corruption in that organized a fashion and would keep evidence of it on their everyday communication devices?
The Adani Group has denied the U.S. allegations and has said it would seek legal recourse. But what happens next is expected to have political as well as business ramifications. Gautam Adani is a close ally of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and has been a key partner for him. And prosecuting this case could take months or even years, which means the case may be impacted by the appointment of a new U.S. attorney in New York. When President-elect Donald Trump returns to the White House early next year, he'll choose someone new to lead the office prosecuting the case.
That will be one of the most interesting situations to watch. The speed at which these charges were unsealed has surprised many. Most had expected that the indictment would take several more months. So there does seem to be an element of politics in this entire situation. Now the question is, with a new administration taking over in the U.S., will it continue to prosecute the case in this fashion, or will it seek to drop the charges? Lawyers are mixed on what could potentially happen, but that will depend on how the new president of the United States, Donald Trump, views his relationship with India, views his relationship with Prime Minister Modi, and seeks to use whatever leverage he wants to be able to get India to play the role he expects. They have both been great friends, but that might mean nothing for a case of this nature. Because in the negotiation of two large countries, almost all of these are tools that each country will seek to gain leverage through. Unfortunately for Adani, that means he becomes a pawn in the process.
The Trump transition team didn't respond to requests for comment from Bloomberg. And India's government declined to comment when contacted for further information. The White House said
the specifics of this is something that SEC and DOJ can speak to directly. But again, we believe that this relationship between India and the U.S. has been built on a strong foundation.
After the break, how the spotlight on Gautam Adani and his sprawling conglomerate changed when short seller Hindenburg Research called Adani's rise the largest con in corporate history. And we'll look at what the case against the Adani Group could mean for the broader Indian economy. Before these latest charges from U.S. prosecutors, Gautam Adani's sprawling empire had been rocked by claims that it had manipulated its stock price and committed accounting fraud.
So just to give the high-level understanding of who Hindenburg Research is, because it is best known for...
In a short-selling attack in January 2023, a New York-based group called Hindenburg Research accused the Adani Group of what they said was the largest con in corporate history.
It did disclose a short position in Adani Group, and what it's saying, Paul, basically, is that the conglomerate engaged in market manipulation and then accounting fraud as well. Now, Gautam Adani has denied this, and he says that the report is baseless, but that hasn't, of course, been enough to prevent a sell-off in the market as well. So this chart...
The dual effect that the Hindenburg Research report and short seller attack had on Adani was that it decimated his fortunes. At one point in time, the group had lost over $150 billion in market value.
That's Bloomberg's Menaka Doshi again.
But it also hurt his image significantly because it brought back into the forefront several questions about corporate governance and market manipulation that otherwise had been buried because of his so-called political proximity to Narendra Modi and other politicians.
The Hindenburg report sent the Adani Group's shares into steep decline. It took several months for the stocks of the various subsidiary companies under Adani Group to bounce back. But Menaka says even to this day, the conglomerate itself is still in recovery mode.
After the Hindenburg attack, they did what any smart business group would do, which was to cut back on debt, raise more funds, and to make sure that they would never be in as vulnerable a position as they were in January 2023.
Earlier this year, Bloomberg sat down with the Adanis for an exclusive interview in which Gautam Adani, the group's founder and the family patriarch, addressed the Hindenburg report. He says the incident brought the family together and made them more united.
This incident makes family bring more together and work very hard to fight it back. And in fact, basically these Hindenburg issues of this last year was Adani Group history is the highest performance.
But the Hindenburg report prompted the Justice Department, as well as the SEC, to look into some of the claims it contained. And in March, Bloomberg reported that U.S. prosecutors had widened their probe to look at whether the company may have engaged in bribery, as well as the conduct of Gautam Adani himself. That probe resulted in these latest charges against Gautam Adani and other defendants, his nephew Sagar Adani and Vineet Jain. Both Sagar and Vineet are executives at Adani Green Energy. I asked Menaka how the latest indictment compares to the Hindenburg allegations.
Hindenburg and this are chalk and cheese. Hindenburg was an aggregation of several allegations that the Adani Group had faced over the years, with a few new ones thrown in that effectively raised questions that had already been raised in India in the past, which were of poor governance standards, market manipulation, and fraudulent auditing. In that sense, the Hindenburg research report, while scandalous because of the way it put those questions together, did not necessarily ask of anything very new of the Adani Group. This is a whole different level of seriousness. These are two of the US's most premier investigating agencies accusing Gautam Adani of promising to pay bribes in India and then lying about that corruption to investors across the world, including in the U.S.
Following the U.S. indictment, Bloomberg reported that Indian regulators are also looking into whether Adani Group violated market rules for failing to properly disclose the U.S. investigation. And Menaka says the U.S. charges could just be the beginning of the group's legal troubles.
Besides what government agencies and regulators will do, these cases do provide grounds for investors in various different jurisdictions that have invested in various different Adani companies to stand up and ask the question, did you make adequate disclosures? So yes, the expectation is that there could be a series of lawsuits that the Adani Group might have to face.
So, Menaka, given how serious the charges are, what does this case mean for companies in India? Is this like an indictment on corporate India?
It definitely doesn't make corporate India look good, but it's not an indictment of corporate India. Given the significance of the infrastructure sector in India's growth story, and given how core the Adani Group is to the rollout of infrastructure in the country, this episode will be significant to the fortunes of both the economy and the sector. What this does do is hurt India at a time when the country is seeking to take its story to a wider set of global investors as it makes efforts to go from the fifth largest economy in the world to the third largest economy, and as it also makes efforts to become a developed nation over the next 20 years. At a time when you are courting foreign investors, episodes like this don't help your narrative at all. Will this mean investors will run away from India? No. Will this mean that some investors will say there is an additional risk premium for doing business in India? Probably yes. Will this mean that some investors will now want to stay away from infrastructure sectors that have significant government intervention? Absolutely. So it will have a graded impact on both the business sector in India as well as the economy. Nothing will happen in absolute. You won't see a sudden flood of money out. You won't see people give up on India because most investors want to go where growth is. But you will see a moderation in their enthusiasm towards the country, at least for a while, as they digest the seriousness of this situation.
This is the Big Take Asia from Bloomberg News. I'm Juan Ha. If you're interested in hearing more about Indian billionaire Gautam Adani and his sprawling empire, check out our previous episode on the rise of the Adani Group, called $200 billion, 4 heirs, and one mighty empire. It's linked in our show notes, and you can find it on the Big Take Asia feed. This episode was produced by Yang Yang, Naomi and Jessica Beck, with help from Rohit Pathak. It was mixed by Alex Sugiura and fact-checked by David Fox and Adriana Tapia. It was edited by Caitlin Kenny, Jeanette Rodriguez, and Bhuma Srivastava. There was additional reporting by Kai Schultz, Bhuma, and Anto Antony. Naomi Shaven is our senior producer. Elizabeth Ponso is our senior editor. Nicole Beamsterbroer is our executive producer. And Sage Bauman is Bloomberg's head of podcasts. Please follow and review the Big Take Asia wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps new listeners find the show. See you next time.